Hi, everyone. Welcome. We are so excited to have Brittany here today to speak to us about transitioning from crib to bed.
Right.
I'm Melissa Gottesman, and I am personally very excited for this because I have a toddler who is currently in his crib in a tent, which is a Band-Aid solution. So the transition is coming for us. So I am really excited to hear some advice on this. Um, and with that, or thank you for joining with Augie. Um, this is an amazing community for moms and dads who are looking for advice, looking for a sense of community. It's the number one platform for parents to find community, share recommendations, and learn from experts. So without further ado, I will introduce Brittany.
Hi, guys. Thank you for the intro, and great to know that my co-host here needs this info live. So this is going to be productive. And you guys
Yes.
have to excuse me. I usually look more beautiful than this, but I'm in LA now. I know most of you are probably on the East Coast, which is where I'm from, but I'm in LA now, and I was at the World Series game last night with my children. That went. It was basically a 2-for-1. It was like 18 innings. So I will look better. See, this is why you got to get good sleep, right? So you can do things like this.
You look
So
great to me.
thank you so much. That's very nice. Um, so I'm going to walk you guys through it. I'll introduce myself briefly. You don't want to hear me yapping away, so I want to make sure there's plenty of time for questions. But yes, hi, my name is Brittany, and I am a pediatric sleep and potty consultant. I work with families from itty bitties who are just born all the way up to age 7. And I do work with families one-on-one. So a family will hire me for their toddler or baby specific issues. But I also have courses because some families just want even something like this. They just need the information. They can do it at their own pace. And I also have a podcast called The Snooze Button. So, one thing I'm going to do after this, probably tomorrow, is send you guys a recap. And I will include a couple of episodes from my podcast that pertains, there's like several of them that have to do with crib and bed transition related things. Um, and you can feel confident if I'm telling you something. It's about 2,500 families at this point. So I do know what I'm talking about, usually, at least when it comes to sleep. So, okay, talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about why I'm Team Crypto College. I don't literally mean that, but I will explain why truly, families either dropping the nap preemptively or moving their toddlers to a bed too early when they weren't jumping out keeps me in business. And you don't have to be those people. We'll talk about good and not so good reasons why you would move to a bed. And then if you do have a child who is like you want them to stay in the crib, but they have decided they're moving out, is there anything you can do to stop that from happening? And then if they're really little, why you would secure the door or why you wouldn't. And then ultimately, whatever age it is, like when you're making the move, how can you do that? Because if you do it at the right time, effectively, it can be pretty seamless, right? It doesn't have to be like a big dramatic thing, which I don't want it to be for you guys. So, okay, Team Crypto College, which I did not coin this. One of my clients, I have a client membership program, and she was like, "We're Team Crypto College," and that's what they all say now. So I had to adopt it. So this, I'm going to save your sanity. Don't rush into it for the wrong reasons. I think there's something about, I think especially as a first time parent, and I felt this way with my oldest. It's like you're so excited for every milestone, even if it's something like starting solids, right? I'll have a client where they're like, we're going to start giving them solids 3 times a day at 4 months. And I'm like, if you really want, go for it. But trust me, once you start, you have to do it every day. It's actually a lot of work. And sometimes I think we're in a rush to do things because they like sound cute or fun. And then there isn't a ton of like thought behind it. And then it's not fun for anybody. So no two, there are going to be situations where you do have a 2-year-old who is just a future Alabama linebacker, and like he is getting out. He is going to like muscle his way over the front. I see those kids a lot. So we will have a game plan if that happens, but don't feel like you need to rush into it just because like your neighbor did or like, whatever the reasons are. And truthfully, most toddlers, if they're like happy in their sleep environment, like they're happy in their crib, they're like, I'm fine going to bed. I don't care. I take a nap. And sometimes I wake up early and I like talk to myself. They're just much less likely to try to get out because it's not, they don't like equate sleep with a negative thing. So they're not like trying to escape it. Right. So that's one thing. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost giving people non-advice when they ask about like daylight savings or travel or like, what if they're teething? I'm like, if you have a good independent sleeper, you're not going to ask. And my actual clients don't ask me about those things. It's people who don't have a good sleeper yet. Because understandably, if things are already kind of precarious, then you toss in one more factor and the whole thing implodes. Right. So that's actually my best advice is to lock it up now So hopefully they don't want to climb out, but they might. Okay. So here are reasons. These are all things I've heard many, many times. Like, why is our 2-year-old in a bed? Okay. They're too big for the crib. I hear that a lot. That's not a thing. It is not like a car seat. There are absolutely products for babies and toddlers that we need to be very conscious of, like height and weight restrictions and things like that. If they're wearing a helmet that's too small when they're learning to ride a bike, things like that. The crib, unless their head is grazing the ceiling and they're like being hit with a ceiling fan, which I can't imagine is ever the case. I mean, a 6-year-old could be, because I've seen them play in them. Yeah, a 6-year-old could be in a crib. So don't feel like you need to do that. I hear a lot like they want to. They've been expressing that they want to, which is often a reason why I'll tell parents to stop trying to like potty train a just turned 2-year-old. Like, I know they want to, but like my oldest wants to go to the World Series for all 7 games. And we're not going to do that because I'm not made of money, right? They're allowed to like want things. And our job as the parent sometimes is to be like, that makes sense. Great idea. And other times, it's okay. They can want it, but they're not necessarily getting it. And I think a lot of times, understandably, when a kid has been a good sleeper and they start struggling, parents are like going through a list of like, what could maybe make this easier or better. So I'll hear that sometimes too, like, well, they hate their crib, or like they just don't want to nap, or they want me to stay there. So I think if I just put them in a bed, it'll make it easier. And I hate to say it, it usually has the opposite effect, right? And I hear a lot too, like, we need the crib for a younger sibling, which, you know what, a pack and play is a totally safe, comfortable place to have a baby. You don't need to buy 2 cribs, but I really don't want a newborn parent dealing now with a 2-year-old who's running wild in the house at bedtime and they have a newborn that they're trying to take care of. So that will help a lot too, to not do for those things. If they're 4 or older, just full stop, great time to do it. And if they're actively climbing out despite all of your best efforts, which we'll talk about what those are, like what can you do to prevent it from happening. And the 4-year-old thing, it's funny because I'll do these events live and I see sometimes the parents' faces, they're like, 4? I thought it was like 2.5. And I'm like, I know all your neighbors are doing it at 2.5. And I did used to say from my training, because we were more trained on like 3.5 is kind of like what you should tell parents to do. And I've noticed over the years the difference in the experience for both the child and the parent when they're 2 or 3 versus 4. It's like one is like hell month at their house, and one is like the next day they're in a bed and it's just like not a big deal. So truly, I wouldn't be moving them before 4 unless they're actively climbing out. And the other thing too that I would be remiss not to say, because this comes up with some sleep things I suggest or even potty things, is there, if you have a very easygoing kid, it's kind of like the whole gentle parenting thing, right? Like there's like some script you're supposed to say. If you have a kid who is already like pretty chill, then you're like, I can see that you didn't want to do that. I can see. And they're going to like be fine either way. But if you have a kid who is already like very strong willed, very temperamental, is prone to throw tantrums, then you being like, listen, Bobby, I see that you don't like this candy. Like they are going to slap you in the face. And that's not because you did the wrong thing and didn't like say your phrase properly. It's just that the harder it is for a kid, like the more buttoned up with like the right things you want to do. So there are 2-year-olds who transition to a bed and it's no big deal. But let's not find out if that's your kid or not. Why not just err on the side of it could be hard? So we're not going to put you through that. So if they are trying to get out though, because that happens all the time, some kids just do, they're just mischievous, they want to get out. What can we do to help? So one thing, if this hasn't happened to you yet, if if you have a toddler in a crib who is not trying to get out, I would strongly suggest you keep them in a sleep sack. That is your best line of defense. Now, some kids are creative. I've seen very small girls be able to get, like in a kite baby, one of the like bamboo ones, get like their entire body through an armhole because they can just like stretch and get out. So inside out, and kids will take them off too, right? So if you have a little bit of a Houdini child, inside out and backwards, and then opt for one that doesn't have stretch. So there are plenty, like Burt's Bees doesn't really, Halo. Kite Baby is the one that I personally really like and recommend to clients, but it's not good for crib climbers because it has the zipper at the bottom, so they can easily undo it. And even if it's inside out and backwards, again, if they're petite, they can probably get their whole body through the head hole. So you want to have them in something that basically they aren't going to have the option of throwing a leg over the side. So the only other option is a kid who can fully like muscle their way over, which does exist. But for those kids, then the crib, if you have it, so some cribs, as you guys know, will have one side that's higher than the other. And usually it's like the bars are on 3 sides and one is more just wood or whatever material it is. So just simply flipping that the other direction for some kids is enough because they don't have like the sort of the, you know, whatever to get over the sides. And so now that that part is solid, they can't get out anymore. And then our last possible lowest possible setting for the crib. And even like I've had plenty of families be successful putting the crib all the way to the ground, like the mattress all the way to the ground, if it's possible with the type of crib you have without the box spring. And then they're totally fine. They just needed more space between the two to knock it out. And like our friend here, so many people use crib tents. I have so many friends, like personal friends, who I'm like, you guys stop using these crib tents. And they're like, yeah, I know, but I just want to. So, you know what, do what you want. There is like, for me, safety is just the thing. And some kids, especially if you have a mischievous kid, if they can like untangle it, that's typically why we say don't use it, because then it becomes a safety issue if they could get like tangled and entrapped in it. But a very common thing for families to use. So, okay, securing the door. So this is a big conversation I have with especially my 2-year-old clients, but even the 3-year-olds too. Why would you secure a toddler's door? So let's say you have a kid, they're 2 or 3. You've done everything you could to keep them in the crib, but they are successfully getting out. And I will say too that some kids will jump out once or twice, and then they either get the message from you because you're pretty like stern and are like, that's not safe, you can't do that again. They stop doing it, or they get freaked out. Like I've seen kids where they'll kind of fall out one time, like they're being silly and like climbing around, and it freaks them out. And in those cases, you don't need to move them. Like it's not really the act of them being able to get out that is the problem. It's more if they're doing it frequently and it's dangerous, right? Like it is hard for them to do it, and they're figuring out how to get over the side, and they could like fall and hurt their head. So just have that in mind too. If your child does it occasionally, I honestly probably wouldn't move them. But let's say you have to. It's a 2.5-year-old. They got out. There's nothing else we can do. They figured out how to get out over the sleep sack, etc. Secure the door. So it's funny because I think parents are all over the map with this. I have plenty who are like, yes, please. I'm scared of them being able to roam around my house. But others, I think we're like millennials, we're like the Dateline generation where like you hear that and it's like locked up raw in the basement, like chained to the wall. So we have to like separate. I always go back with this kind of stuff to like, not we're emotional because we're moms and dads, but like removing the emotion and just going back to like the logic of it. So number one thing would be fire safety and just general safety. So general safety, like I had a 3-year-old client who lived in San Francisco, like in the city, and she was just a tester. You know, some kids like to test, and she would go and like open their front door and like try to walk out into the streets of San Francisco. That is incredibly dangerous. And she knew how to unbolt the door, right? Like she just figured it out. So general safety for sure, but even fire safety. As a part of my training, we had first responders come and talk to us. And that was one thing they brought up a lot, is that kids who are really too young to understand how to handle a real emergency, which a 2-year-old cannot. Like a 7-year-old, you're like, stop, drop, and roll, call 911. Like they understand. They tend to do strange things in emergencies, like hide in a cabinet, and now the firefighters can't find them. They're like, that's when these like tragic things will happen, right? So thinking about it, just if you want to think about safety, but boundaries too are really important. So because of fire safety, I always tell families to keep the door fully closed. Bedrooms, like our bedrooms too, just doors should be closed. And it makes the boundary really clear, right? Like we think about as adults, like we understand nuance, right? Like it's the same thing as like, I'll lay with you for 5 minutes. Like we get that. But if you're 2 or 3, all you're hearing is like, figuratively and literally, the door is open to negotiate with you. And now I can see you out there, and I'm going to be the haunted toddler standing at the top of the stairs, like seeing what you're doing. And I'm going to have you chase me back into the room. And it's just unclear to them if it's not like the door is open, it's bedtime, we're hanging out with mom and dad, blah, blah, blah. Then we close the door, you're supposed to go to sleep, right? And then in terms of the door being secured, we have to go back to, again, the logic and thinking about autonomy, right? So autonomy meaning like we are all as adults allowed to just get up and leave this room right now, right? Because we can be trusted to be responsible with that. And to me, having a child able to leave the room when they're 2 or 3 is kind of like leaving like a bowl of marshmallows in the bedroom and being like, don't eat those until the morning. That's the rule. It's like, I get that they could do that, but 99% of them, it's like kind of unfair, right? We're like tempting them. So we take them basically from like this little cage that they've been in their whole life. And then we're like, you now have access to our entire home. That's like a massive leap in autonomy, right? To be like crib, house, especially if you have a big house. So, and then we're not even thinking about things like falling down the stairs and all that kind of stuff. But it is age appropriate to say you had access to that crib and now you're a big boy and girl, and we'll talk through like ways you can prep them for it. Now you have access to your whole room, right? So that when it's presented that way and it's not presented like you used to be able to just like roam around our house and now we're locking you in the room, which feels negative. If you have a kid who's always been in a crib, it feels exciting. It's like, oh, I could just get out of bed and go like get a toy or something. So they're happy about it. So that's one thing to think about too. But I think knowing your kid as well is relevant, because when I have 4-year-old clients that we're moving to a bed, most of the time they don't need the door secured, but occasionally they are just the type of kid that is still very much in that like toddler testing mode. Like I had a little boy once, it's a really good example, who was just obsessed with, he had twin baby sisters. They were newborns and he was just obsessed with them and he wanted to feed them. So he would leave his room. He wasn't like trying to be bad, but he would leave his room, go to the fridge and get yogurts, like his yogurts, and then like dump them in the twins' bassinet, like in the middle of the night. Right. So it was like really cute and it wasn't bad, but like he was not like developmentally at a place where it was safe for his parents to like not know where he was in the house, basically. So I think understanding that, or I will occasionally have clients who are about 4 or 5 that have a house that's like a tall and skinny, right, where there's like really steep stairs, and they're just worried like if they came out, that their room is right next to the stairs, and we're going to put a gate there because they could trip and fall down. So I think understanding not just age, but also like who your kid is and home layout and all that kind of stuff. And there's also many ways to do it. So you don't necessarily just need to lock the door. I do think for most kids who jump out of the crib, a gate is usually not a great move, because if they can get over the side of a crib, they can get out over a gate. But theoretically, a gate would work, right? There's also products called, and I'll send you guys links to all this stuff, called door monkeys and door buddies, that depending on your door frame, it basically keeps the door open like a little sliver. So they could really see out. Like if you're worried about them feeling locked in, or they like really like to like kind of look out a little bit and you don't mind that, you have that option. And then you can even just do a child-proof knob, especially for young toddlers. They cannot figure that out, right? The knob is just little proofed there. Most important thing though is that this isn't they're not bad. A toddler jumping out of the crib is trying to explore, right? A 2 and 3-year-old's entire job is to like test and see and try new things. So you never would want to present it as like you're bad and like you're not following the rule. That's why we're doing this. It's not a threat. It's not like if you don't stay in your room, I'm going to put it on. It's just like you're little, the same way when you're a baby in a crib, we put you there because it's safe for you. Same thing here. And you would show them how you're using it. And when you get to a place where you think they're ready to not need it, you give them a couple of days. And if they just continuously come out and it's not working, then you put it back on for a few months, right? Because I will frequently get clients who have tried to secure the door, but it is becoming like a nightly, like stressful negotiation where they're like threatening the kid and then like taking it off for an hour. And we don't want it to feel icky to anybody. Okay, so let's just say, regardless of whether or not the door is secured or their age, like you are making the move, you're ready to do it. So one thing I actually didn't put in the notes that I'm realizing I should have is I would first room proof. So that would mean anything like if you have a big like dresser drawer, chest, like something really large, you are making sure that you have it secured to the back. I'm like blanking on the exact word for that, right? But it's like it's like secured. Like if there was an earthquake, it wouldn't move. Things like that. And anything that your kids would use to be like silly and mischievous. This goes back to knowing your own kid, right? Like some kids really, they move to a bed and they like don't realize they can get out, which is just so adorable. And they'll just stay in there the whole night and it's fine. But if you have the type of kid that like my middle son is like this, we're just like, why is everything like I could give him a mint and it'll be like in 30 pieces stuck to the wall, like 30. I'm like, what's happening here? So if you have that kind of kid, then you're like, okay, let's take out the bottles of lotion. And like, I could see him like opening the closet. And like, I've had kids just like, they're just like trying to have fun. They like, it's the first time they've been freeballing around their room. Like maybe you need to put a child safety thing on your closet door, or like where the diapers are. Like, is there anything worse than a mom than having a nicely stacked like pull-ups or diapers and someone just shoves it? So you basically want to make sure the room is definitely safe, but also you're not putting yourself in a position where they're like doing silly things to get you back into the room and it becomes like a fun game for nobody. So beyond that, beyond like the child proofing, I would, as the parents, try to come up with a game plan for it, because I think this is one of those changes that sometimes parents do on a whim. And then they're like, wait, what are we going to do if he comes out of the room? Or like, he usually stays in his crib until 7 and now he's like just walking out at 6 a.m. Like, is that okay? What should we do? So I would come up with a plan as the parents. And if you have like a nanny who lives with you or something, but like you guys all have your plan, so that by the time you tell your child, you're like, and this is how it's going to work. And you feel, like as a parent, if you're not confident in what you're telling them, they can sniff you out in 2 seconds. Like my kids know if they're like, we have dessert. And if I'm like, did anyone, that's when they start melting down. Right. Whereas if I'm just like, I love dessert too, buddy, not tonight. Like they're still like, aw, but they can tell that I like knew what I was going to say. So you want to be like prepared for what they're going to push back on and what will happen. And I would give them a couple of days notice, like, you're such a big boy or girl. We're so proud of you. And very much like present it to them like a privilege and a responsibility. Because at the end of the day, that's what our kids want. Like they want to feel like they're big and they're powerful and they're like a part of the team. They don't like really care about a sticker chart, like maybe for a couple of days, but like that will wear off. So presenting it to like, we're letting you do this because we really trust you. Right. And think about even as like a teenager, like my mom was the one who would like yell at me. But my dad, if I ever like, was like drinking or something, he would just be like, I'm just surprised. I'm just disappointed. I was like, this is so much worse. I don't want you to be disappointed. So not that you're gaslighting your kids at all, but like presenting it like, no, we're giving you this privilege because we trust you and we know you can do it. They will often rise to the occasion if they're really ready for it. And definitely making sure you do have like a plan. So like, when are they allowed to get out of the room? This is one scenario. I do not love okay to wait clocks for kids in cribs because to me it's like, what are they going to do with that information? Like they can't get out. So either you're trying to get them to get out, which is not what we want, or they're just like standing there screaming because the light turned green. It doesn't like help anybody. But if you have a kid who is old enough to be leaving the room at their own will, and you as the parent need to determine that, and they're in a bed, then and they can't tell time yet, then it's a great tool, right? So it's like we're gonna sending you the message basically like when this light changes, like wake up time is coming soon. And if you want to get up and start reading your books or playing, that's okay. And once it's green, you're allowed to leave your room. Like that's a great reason to use one. And I would consider, especially if it is like a 4-year-old, like an older kid, you could like, if there's another kind of like responsibility or like shift you were going to make for them, like maybe you've always gotten them dressed fully. And now you're like, we're going to start picking out your clothes at the end of the day. And you're sort of like prepping them for, when you do get to like kindergarten, and it's so nice if you have a kid that like has a drawer where they can grab their snack and they know where to put their water bottle in, and you're not doing everything for them. You can kind of ease them into these things together. So I found that that can be a really nice way to add like whatever your family dynamic is, you're adding in like new responsibilities. So again, it feels like empowering to them. It's like you're in charge of your mornings now. You're going to like watch your clock, pick out your clothes, whatever those things are. And I think in general, with any like big transition like this, I would assume you have a couple of days where it's kind of funky. And like that's again, you want to have a game plan. Like if they don't listen to the clock, what is your game plan? Are you going like what are you going to do? Are you going to secure the door right away? Are you going to give them a week? But I think knowing how you'll address it ahead of time is a good way to go. A couple of other pro tips, and then I want to make sure you guys have time for questions. So I would suggest if you have the option, opt for either just the toddler conversion kit, which most cribs come with one, or you can buy it separately later on. So they're basically in the same space. The only thing is they can now get out if they want, or you have like a twin bed. And especially if you guys are city people, I live in LA now, but in a small house by the beach, like a trundle was important to me because if we have grandma visiting, I'm like, you're on the trundle. Sorry, we do not have a guest room for you. So if you want like more space for people, I would opt for that versus a big bed, because it all goes back to that autonomy thing, right? We sometimes forget you have to like take yourself, like I literally do this for myself. I take myself back to like how it felt to be like a kindergartner. And like, you will like see a place that you lived or went to when you were really little and you're like, that's like a 2-bedroom house. And I thought it was like a mansion. I was like, oh my God, my teacher is so big. And she's like 5'1". Everything is like so little to them. So sometimes I think kids struggle with the transition because they're moving to like such a massive space, right? And if you don't have that option, maybe you already own a queen bed and like that's just what it's going to be. You can get effectively like pool noodles. There are these little like bumper things and you can separate the bed in half, which is kind of nice too. So I'll have clients do that. And then like one side is for their stuffies and things like that. And one is for them. And then it feels less scary to be in a big place. And I would really avoid using a bunk bed until especially if kids sharing a room, until the youngest one is 6 or 7 for safety. Yeah, it's not great. We don't want anyone breaking their arm, which unfortunately does happen. And then having the door secure ready and tested with adult strength, like nothing is worse than you're all in, you have your game plan. You're like, our 2.5-year-old Alabama quarterback needs to be in a bed and this is what it is, but you have not tested it. And like, I don't think any of us have like installed a door monkey before. And then they like 2 snaps and the thing goes down and you're like, oh God, what do we do now? Now it's 9 p.m. and everyone's crying and the door is not secured. So make sure you test it with grownups. And if you do have a child who's potty trained, and I won't get into the weeds on night training now, but if they are, proactively on their own, they're just waking up dry and they occasionally have to pee and are using a bathroom, then have a plan for that. So that might impact whether or not you secure the door if they're older. But it could mean also you have a mini potty in their room that they're welcome to use. Like that's totally fine too. And if you do have kids sharing a room, so these are the two caveats to like, why do you have to move them to a bed when they're 4? If you have a child who's happy in their crib and they are either mischievous with their younger sibling who's in a crib as well, or they're like just really loving, like that little boy who would dump the yogurts, that to me is like a safety concern and a reason why you would keep them both in a crib, right? If like once the big one's out, they're like, I want to put a blanket over the baby's face. And you're like, baby is suffocating, not great. That would be a reason to wait a little bit longer until they're developmentally at a place where they can deal with that. And I think to me, like it's good to have a rule for yourself. To me, when you're in kindergarten, public or private school, like you need to be able to wipe yourself, go to the nurse by yourself, like pack your own bag to go to classes. So it goes back to autonomy, right? That's a lot of autonomy outside of the house. So to me, then inside the house, you should not be like confined to a crib, right? Your autonomy at home should match where you are elsewhere. Um, okay, so, and obviously this is my full-time job. So if all of this is making you be like, shit, I'm too far gone, what do I do? Then give me a call and we will chat. So, okay, do you guys have questions? Any of you with current or future transition things we can chat through?
So any questions, you can add them to the chat. We have one so far. I will read it. This is from Sarah and Jack.
Okay.
If my 2 almost 3-year-old is safely able to climb out of the crib in the morning, is that a reason to move them? She's a bit of a monkey.
I mean, I feel like I should say yes, move them, but if I'm being totally honest, like no, if she's happy in her crib and you feel confident she's not coming out too early, then no, I don't really think you need to move her, to be honest. I think it's actually fine to keep kids in a crib, even if you know they can get out, as long as it's not a safety issue. So I think that's fine. Yeah. Anybody else? No. Oh, some
Okay,
suggestions.
we have another one. Can you give some suggestions on a 2-year-old sharing a room with a new sibling?
Yes. And we sort of did just touch on that a little bit, which is more that well, A, for any room sharing, like full stop, you want them both to be good sleepers. That's another kind of like, oh, we'll move to a bed so it'll make their sleep issues better. I will sometimes have clients say, like, should we move our 2 kids into a room together? Because maybe then they'll like, it'll be easier for them if they're together, which is like just an invitation for whoever's struggling with sleep to be screaming at 5 a.m. and you're like running in to grab them so they don't wake up their sibling. So I would, before you do any type of room sharing, and honestly, age, gender, it doesn't matter. It could be a 3-month-old and a 7-year-old. Like, I don't care, but both of them are good independent sleepers. And then the only other thing I was mentioning with like the crib and bed thing is if the older child is in a bed or like you're thinking of moving them to a bed and they're either like kind of mischievous and will go like jump in the baby's crib and like throw blocks at them just to be funny, or they're like wanting to help them, but it's dangerous, right? They're like trying to put a blanket over them and they're a newborn or something. So those are the only things I would consider. And then ideally they have the same bedtime, but that I think you can work around. It's not always possible.
Okay, we have another. Any advice for transitioning from parents' bed to his own bed? My boy is 3.
3. Yeah, I mean, I think that one's tough. Age-wise, it's tough because in some sense, you're like, well, they're so close to being able to be in a bed. Why wouldn't you just do it? But I think, and this is without knowing the context of how long he's been in the bed and all those factors. But I think in general, transitions in cribs are always easier than in beds. So it might be worth, depending on your stamina to handle it. It will probably be faster and easier if you actually put him in a crib. However, he might be a jumper and maybe that wouldn't work. But either way, I think the best thing you can do, and this is regardless of like the type of method you use and all of that, is that you have a plan for it. So you know exactly what you're going to do. And you feel really confident that even if you're intervening a lot, if he's crying or he's upset, that you're not going to change what you do, especially with a kid, even more so than a baby, because then they have the back context, right? They're like, you said I was gonna have to sleep in my bed, but I did XYZ and you put me back in your bed. So I'll just do it again tomorrow night. And they only get stronger and smarter. So just do it when, and that's what I tell people when they ask, like, what's the right time to sleep train? I'm like, when you're positive you will stick with it, even if it's really hard, as long as you have like the right thing to follow. I wouldn't do it on a whim because you're tired one day. And I do think if it's a kid, like assuming you're going to be in a different room, like he or she has been in your room and now they're going to be in their own. I don't think you need to overthink this piece of it. It's not a silver bullet, but I would try to spend time in the room that they're going to be sleeping in when it's not associated with sleep and making sure they feel like they have a positive association with it, right? If it's like a side office you've never used and then you're trying to just like drop them in there one day, I can see why they would be like, excuse me, right? So even as a lead up to it, you wouldn't tell them ahead of time, this is why, but you could like bring some toys in there and just make it like a fun, happy place so that when you do make the transition, they're like, oh yeah, I like it here. This is a nice place.
Okay. Our next question is, um, for a floor bed, are body pillows safety concern? Parentheses, mostly tied to the side of the bed rails. My daughter is still in a crib and happy there, but I'm game planning for a transition to a floor bed.
I think so. Here's actually my suggestion with the floor bed. And I would say safety concern. No, there's like some nuance to it, unless we're talking about a kid who's like under 2. I would not want, well, at first, I just wouldn't want an 18-month-old like not in a crib anyway, because they're just chaotic at that age and who knows what they would get into. But I think the younger they are, there could be more of a safety concern with like large pillows and things like that where they could get stuck. I think besides the bunk bed thing, the only thing I'm ever flagging with clients in or like a crib tent for toddlers is if there's a decent sized gap between the bed and the wall and it's not like completely flush against it, nor is it far away. And kids literally do get stuck in there. So that's actually the biggest thing I'd be worried about. But my suggestion for you, if you do a floor bed, is to still have like a small frame where it's elevated a little bit, which it sounds dumb. And again, none of these things are silver bullets. But I think sometimes when it's too close to when it just is the floor, they struggle to make the connection like one is for sleeping and one is for playing. And you don't want that to be blurry. You want it to be really clear, like when you get on the bed, you're supposed to go to sleep. So I would try to create some type of separation for it and still also go with like a twin bed or something really small, partially for that reason. So it doesn't feel big and just like I just live in a padded room now. But also so you aren't tempted to sleep there because sometimes that's hard too. If you have too much, if it's too big and cozy, you just want to get in there with them. And then now you're co-sleeping again. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Yes, we have one last one.
Okay.
I have an 18-month-old and I'm pregnant with baby number 2. They will be 21 months apart. Baby number 1 is a great sleeper, so was considering transitioning her to a bed at 2 years old. Should I reconsider and buy a second crib?
Yes. Yes. I just saved your life. Not really, but especially those are the people that I'm the most like, oh my God, don't do it. Is when people are like, I don't want to change 2 diapers. I'm going to potty train my 19-month-old. I'm like, when you have a 2-week old, honey, no, you don't want your life will be so much easier. And there's something really nice when you have a newborn and you are exhausted, you're like up all night. Especially if this one's a good sleeper, you know exactly where they are. They're happy. They're like in their crib performing the Eras tour. And you're like, you know what? I'm going to sleep until 7:30 and then go get them because they're happy and safe. I need a break. You will be so glad. And you don't necessarily need to buy another crib either. You could do a pack and play as long as you want. And if you go that route, especially if it's going to be like a long-term thing, potentially that they'll be in there for a year or two. The baby Bjorn one I find is just comfortable. It's nice. It's big. It's big. The Newton one's pretty big too. The Newton and the Lotus and the baby Bjorn, but the Lotus is giant, heavy, cumbersome, and annoys me. So I don't love it. But that would be my suggestion. All right. Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Brittany. I found that really, really helpful for our
Of course.
situation. I hope everyone else did too.
Yes.
And thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you guys for having me. I'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks.